Dr. Power, the guest has arrived.
Oh, thank you, Bonnycastle. Hi, folks. Come on in. Have a seat. There's room for two over here. Well, I'm so glad you joined me today. This is the first of our Smoke Act sessions for our session. I hope you enjoy them. We'll have 8 of these, and they form the discussions that we'll have in class. Not the only things we're going to talk about, but some of the issues that we take out of the paper. And I have to take them. Today's a Wednesday prior to the course start on Monday, so we're a couple of days behind the actual, whatever the current status is of the stories we talk about. So build on them and add any other stories you'd like to talk about. The Smoke Act sessions is something that in Oxford, the Don, the prof, had chambers, sort of quarters, and you did readings there. You didn't so much sit in a classroom, but you'd come down, and the Don would have a small cluster like this of 6 or 7 people around, and through cigars and pipes and port and glasses of sherry, they would talk about issues like we're going to talk about today. And it's through the Socratic dialogue that we exchange ideas and challenge each other and test each other's hypotheses that we tend to get some firm terrain to stand on as through critical thinking and reflective thought, that I'm satisfied with my position. I can defend it. And in this course, that's all we ask you to do. There's no wrong or right answers. Just have some good, hard, reflective thought. And if you're satisfied that your view of the hand is the right view of the hand, then that's where I want you to stand. And it's the same on the exam. There'll be nothing I say that is the correct answer. As long as you can give me evidence-based support for your position, you've met the requirements of the course. I don't want you to be overwhelmed with the course. Those of you who had a chance to go in and do a quick scan of the vast array of materials in here, there's a lot. So go directly to the deliverables and see what you have to produce. Just that will get you your mark that you need to have a mark to go through the system. Anything else is bonus. And I had to design it that way. When Pedro came to me and said, Terry, can you take this from a face-to-face class to an online class and keep the standard, I felt quite challenged and frankly wasn't happy about it. I enjoy the face-to-face teaching and the Socratic dialogue and the interaction and the fast moving of a class environment, and it's hard to replicate that into a online situation. But having said that, not just personally me working on it, but really a collection of a wonderful bunch of people like Bonnycastle that just announced your arrival, and others work hard every week to get these discussions, to edit, and to help me put in the course these rich materials. And I've done it deliberately in the sense that I've had a chance to scan your backgrounds, your bios, both cohorts, and it's interesting. We have such a vast array of folks who are very skilled in strategy, do it almost on a daily basis. Terms like goals, objectives, visions, strategic inflection points, that language, that lexicon will be well known to those folks. There are others of you that I sense this would be rather new, and there'll be a bit of a ramp-up curve to get to understand some of these terms and concepts and notions. And so what I've done is said to everybody, here's the basics in the deliverables, do that, that's all that you're required to do. But for those of you that are already well down the road and becoming strategic practitioners, I put a bonus section in there. And go in there and have a look. It's not required for the exam, but you find a whole bunch of rich things in there that may help you in your day-to-day job. For example, in the second session, I guess, we give you a little red toolbox with about 40 some odd tools in there that you use throughout the program, and many in this course. But for those in the bonus section, I put another 100 tools in there in another box. And more than you'll ever need in your lifetime, but for those interested in strategy and have a passion for it, like I have a passion for it, go in there and have a look around. But the bonus section you'll find rich with materials to look at your pleasure, but do a time appreciation. You need balance in your workplace, balance in your life, and as long as you do the deliverables, I'll be happy. Specifically on the deliverables for these discussion sites, I'd like to make the point that all I expect from you is 2 meaningful posts in a week. 2 meaningful posts in a week. That's not hi, how are you, but that's reflective thought, adding some value, some capital, intellectual capital to the class, and do that for us, and you've met the requirement. That's not to say a number, I've had it in the past, will do 30 or 40 posts in the week because they have a passion. They're enjoying the topic, they're enjoying the flow of the discussion, and I don't want to stifle that. I want you to do that. I want you to enjoy the course and get something out of it, and I'll work with you. But for those that say, look, I've got other things to do and my time is quite tight, just give me 2 meaningful posts on the discussion sites, and you've met the requirements. So that should be helpful in that regard. Critical correctness. I challenge you a little bit on this. I tend to poke the bear a little. There's no political correctness in this class, as long as we're respectful of each other. So we have Muslims in the class and we have Christians in the class, and if we can't have this clash of civilizations, if we can't have these conversations in an academic environment, in a respectful, fair and balanced way, where in the world are you going to have these discussions so you can truly understand? I mean, for example, if I held up my hand and asked you to describe what you see on this side of the hand, you'd probably say, well, an old arthritic hand of a 73-year-old with a ring on it. But if I turned it around here and asked you to describe it, I think you'd agree with me, you'd have to describe it a little bit differently. And so that's what we have to do in this class, is we have to come around from this side of the hand that we view the biases, the way we perceive the world, and come around to this side of the hand and try to stand on that terrain for a few minutes and view the world and get a sense of it. And we're going to do that a lot in this class. That's the only way to establish this critical thinking. And indeed, you may even wonder why in a strategy course are we looking at these emerging issues? And it's because we need to understand the water in the bathtub. If we don't understand the what's about to emerge through the fog and mitigate the damage or exploit the opportunities these changes are going to make in our strategy, in our businesses, and indeed in our lives, then we are not doing our job and what you're being paid for. And most of you are being paid for one thing at your work, and that's to be strategists, to help lead your company. And so we'll talk more about that as the course unfolds. I think I've covered all the points that I wanted to cover, other than say that I'm available to you. I'll work with you. I want you to have some time with your families, and I mean it sincerely. And this is not meant in my course to be a boot camp. It's meant to have some downtime on the weekends. But I accept there's a number of you working so hard during the week, you must do the work on the weekends to get through the course, and I accept that. But I'm saying to most people, I'll expect that it's Friday night. I don't expect to see you around on the weekends. I want you to spend some time with your families, to do what you have to do, but get some downtime and join me again on Monday morning. For those of you that have to work on the weekends, because you can't get it done during the week, I'll be there, I'll be available to you and working with you on the weekends and doing some posts and answering some of your questions throughout the weekends. But as many of you as can, I do underscore the importance of you getting some downtime with your family, because it's putting great stress on the family and on your children, those that have them, and I want you to spend a little time with them. I'll be available to you anytime you want to call, 250, make a note, 250-472-3836, 472-3836 in Victoria. And I've got a better office at home than I have here on the campus, and so I tend to work on these online courses from my home for the next 8 or 9 weeks. And so most of the time you'll find me at that number, unless I'm in at my office here doing meetings and other work. That's where you'll find me. Well, let's turn now to the news if we can. We'll do this. I'll try to keep it a little shorter this week, as we've got a couple of pieces I want you to look at, particularly in the bonus section on the Internet of Things, although I'll touch upon it briefly in this session today. First thing we'll talk about is the congratulations to Arthur McDonald, Professor Emeritus at Queen's University, who has got the Nobel Prize for a neutrino experiment, where a trillion of these little rays come down, particles come down daily and go through you and I and through buildings. We don't know we're being hit by them, but we are. But it's sort of a breakthrough into the deeper understanding of the nature of the universe, and more power to that. And it's nice to see a Canadian applauded for that. But it leads to another question out of this, arising from this, is the aspect of research and development in Canada, and are we spending enough? And I can tell you we're not. If you take a moment sometime and do a quick search as to what, let's say, South Korea spends on research and development, you'll be shocked on how little Canada spends on R&D. And of course, without R&D, there's no innovation, and we continue to fall lower in our standard of living. So this week we talk a little bit about the research and development spending in Canada and the importance of it. Harper is promising $1 billion to the auto sector for this new TTP trade agreement. A couple of things prop out of that. One is the aspect of what we're seeing. In fact, I'm going to even touch upon this about the election coming up, because Harper is doing this, of course, as a way to prime the pump for the election. And next week we'll be faced with choices as to who we should pick. And it's all about Plato and Aristotle. If you're a collectivist, if that's your position that you enjoy the collective, the one for all for one, more taxes, greater social safety nets, then you'll probably want to support somebody like the NDP and possibly the Liberals. If you're right wing, that's the Marxist sort of theory, the socialist theory, the NDP theory. If you're on the other end of the continuum, right wing, Attila the Hun, John Stuart Mills, David Ricardo, Adam Smith, those sort of in those sort of camps of libertarianism, then probably you'd lean a little bit towards the conservative side of the house. And so we're faced with that argument, and that's a bias that you have in every decision you make as to whether or not we should have gun control, whether we should have some social assistance, whether we should increase our Medicaid plan to include free drugs for seniors. All those questions are grounded in your bias and how you view the world and your decision. So Harper here is throwing $1 billion at the auto sector, and I think the dairy sector is getting something as well because of this new agreement, just to make up for what it's going to lose once the barriers to trade come down and we start competing in an open marketplace with America and others. Certainly the price of milk and cheese, you know, is much cheaper in the States as from here. So we're going to see our prices come down, which is good for consumers, but bad for the folks that have been producing this and been protected by milk marketing boards and things of that nature. A topic to talk about. But is that trade agreement a good thing or a bad thing? We could talk about that a little bit in a moment. Certainly at a second level, while not mentioned in the paper, you have to wonder if this agreement being driven in large part by America and the Asian nations excludes China. And is this a way to counterbalance China's increasing control over that area of the globe? And certainly we see that in the South China Sea and other areas, and because of the exporting with the other Asian partners, China is increasing its moral suasion over these nations, and that has impact on the United Nations and everything else, and the use of the Chinese yuan over the American dollar. All are in play in the mix here. And this idea of putting this large, where 40% of the world trade is coming together with this new TPP arrangement, and Canada is now a member of it, there are many different levels to examine this thing. But one that occurred to me, this is also to offset the increasing control and influence that China has in the area. And appreciate your thoughts on that. Investors, yeah, depending where you're watching this, of course, you may have the same problem, but in British Columbia, particularly in Vancouver, housing's at a premium. The average price of a home in Vancouver, just out of the top of my head, is in the area of $1.2 million for an average home. And what the Canada Revenue Agency is doing some investigation, they're finding that an awful lot of these homes, here's one individual, Asian, managed on a $19,000 declared income to Revenue Canada, purchased a $2 million home, and when approached by Revenue Canada saying banks wouldn't approve a mortgage for $2 million based on a $19,000 income, where's the rest of your money? And of course, unable to answer. They've got further studies done over here that 85% of the new owners are Chinese. Of 250 homes they've looked at in the past 2 years, all over $2 million in key neighborhoods. And so there's a lot into this because it's driving the cost of housing up for indigenous folks because they can't afford $2 million homes based on, say, 30% of your, in the rest of Canada, 30% of your gross income. They're far to that mark, which means that more and more existing Canadians are forced to drive 30, 40 miles a day from the farm country to come back into the city to work. And so, I'm not saying we can change it, it's just it's the reality of the city, and Victoria is somewhat the same and growing that we look for. And they've said a lot about the price of housing and and low-cost housing in particular, and why isn't there more? But people haven't tagged on two issues here, it seems to me. One is, what's the price of a 2x4 in the last 10 years? I can tell you it's risen significantly, and the price of land has risen significantly. Until you take a handle on those and get those back down to realistic levels, it seems to me that housing is going to be what it is, very, very expensive, and we're going to see more and more of the haves having the house and the middle class losing houses and going into rental sites, and that's the way it's going to be. And I was listening to Michael Campbell. I enjoy Michael Campbell's show on Saturday morning, and he was talking about what's your biggest expenditure? And he said it was housing. And that's not true. What is your biggest expenditure? I can tell you it's taxes. We spend almost 6 months a year. Every penny you make goes to the tax department. It's only after that 6 months. The Fraser Institute publishes the tax-free day, and it's, I think, around the 6th of June, something in that zone. And imagine that. You work for government. Government steps in and says, you work for us for nothing for the next 6 months. And then after that, you can keep what you've got. That's your biggest expenditure. And so that comes up back down. That goes directly in what you got left to buy food, groceries, and housing. So it's something we could look at. Cost of the Canadian dollar is interesting. Our dollar is certainly lower than the American dollar. And Nissan in London, Ontario, produces a car for $35,000 US. And if you drive a short distance away to Detroit, they buy exactly the same car for $43,395, about an $8,252 US dollar differential between the two. So cars are cheaper that are produced in Canada when sold in America. And that's causing great tension with the automobile manufacturers and suppliers, because a lot of people, to save $8,000 US, are coming to Canada to buy the cars. And it speaks to the importance of importing and exporting, that there are certain winners with a low Canadian dollar, as well as there are certain losers, which we'll talk about in this course, with the low Canadian dollar. But certainly Nissan is a good example of that. Gold has been up recently, and oil has been up recently, marginally up, but as a result of that, our dollar is marginally up to about almost 77 cents. And I think it broke 77 cents last week. Jim Bazilier from BlackBerry Limited is talking once again about the need for Canada to have help for emerging technical companies, and needs to set some sort of research and development group in place, some innovation lobby to compete with Apple's and Google's, because we're getting swallowed because we don't have that research and development being made. The oil sands, Suncor is being very active out there, and I guess there's lots of mergers and acquisitions taking place, and Suncor is leading this charge. And it's a great material in the bonus section on mergers and acquisitions. Shelley McDade spends about a half an hour with us explaining first-hand practical experience as she led 4 mergers and acquisitions within the credit union business. And she puts up some of the concerns and some of the points to watch for in doing it. Quite valuable information. But certainly Suncor is doing that right today as we speak, and it's acquiring. And as the oil comes on down, there's a number of companies that are on the ropes, consolidating, laying off, etc., and time is ripe for mergers and acquisitions. So watch for a number of these things to take advantage of those bargains out there, and we're going to see that happening, more and more takeovers happening and more mergers taking place, all because of the dollar priced in U.S. dollars. I had an interesting talk with one of your colleagues a day or two back. Alberta, he's vice president for a company with 1,000 workers in the oil patch, and we're talking about the price of oil and just kicking thoughts around. And you could make 2 arguments, and Shell did this, the scenario planning, quite well. It's something you should be encouraged to do, is to consider what is the strategic plan for your company for energy costs if oil goes, say, to $65 the next 18 months, or if oil goes to $35 the next 18 months. Both scenarios are possible, and we can talk about that later in the course. And if that's the case, what difference would it make to your business? As strategists, that's your job, to start thinking out in front of the accident and be prepared to either one of those scenarios could have a big difference to your firm. Many firms collapse at $35. Others, like WestJet, 25% of their fuel costs are oil or gas. And so they win when it drops down to $35. Others, of course, oil companies win if it goes up the other way. So have a look. Worth a chat. Chip Wilson from Lululemon. You remember he made a comment about Lululemon's clothes weren't for ladies who were slightly overweight, they disclosed too much. And he said, that was the biggest disaster of my life. He's now opened up his own new little line called Kit and Ace that sells an upscale line of casual appeal. The reason I mention it is the importance of brand and reputation is that you can build your brand up over 20, 30 years and do everything right and have a good reputation, an entrepreneur, etc. And you can blow it with a statement like that in 15 seconds. And he's still trying to recover after 3 years. So consider how important the brand is, both your brand of your company and your personal brand, as we go through it. The IMF cuts the Canadian forecast in 2016 down to GDP of 1%. That's marginal flat. And it doesn't augur well for Canada as this happens. So what are the impact of that if they're forecasting that our growth rate is going to be so limited of 1%? Harper's election budget is very much based on oil at a higher price and a GDP of a much higher rate, 2.6. if they only hit 1%, they won't have a balanced budget as promised. They'll be significantly in the hole. And so as election folks, we need to look at that, not just understanding which political theory we like, whether it's the right-wing Aristotle model or the left-wing, the Plato model. It's going to make a difference here as the actual what happens with Canada's GDP as we move forward. Certainly a concern. What else is in here on talk about? Yeah, I hope you're starting to enjoy the course, getting taken off and getting underway. One or two more stories. Let's see what else we have. But each week, as I say, we're going to have a look in here and take some of these stories and look below the lines and try to draw some things out of it that are likely to impact your business, things we should be watching for. But it's a matter of practice doing this, because you can't craft strategy unless we do what we're doing again, as I've said that here today. Trump hotels are hacked for a year. All the customer and debit card numbers been used at the Trump hotels, including the one in Toronto, the Canadian one, have all been hacked and now in the hands of somebody. In the Internet of Things, I'll show you live streaming of the hacking that's taking place as we speak today. Both they hack government, they hack business, and they hack you. And so it's quite a concern about this Internet of Things as to the dangers in it, notwithstanding all the good things that we talk about. Volkswagen, 8 million cars affected, and I think we pretty well understand what's happened there about their shifting in the computers, so they adjusted it so they could get through the inspections. But it's a German company that makes such damn good cars, all the Germans, Mercedes, etc. And it just seems to me that, was it to be deceitful for the sake of being deceitful, or was it deceitful because they couldn't get over the high emission standards, the demands that government was making for the environment? And the only way you could get around that, because they couldn't technically reach that bar, was it set too high, they took this course of action. I don't know, but it's something we have to look today as we talk about cap and trade and environment and the layers and red tape and the burden that we're putting on businesses. There comes a point, a breaking point, a tipping point, that companies just can't do it. And it's something we should be aware of as business people operating and crafting strategies. This layering on of what clearly sounds right until you actually have to do it. Yeah, we'll talk about that more. There's one in here about the immigration too, that BC is looking at that. And in Canada we have this investor class of immigrant that if you invest X number of dollars in Canada, then you go to the front of the line on getting a permit to come into the country. And when we talk about those $2 million homes, et cetera, although real estate doesn't count as the qualifier, it's working extremely well, to the point that BC is going to temporarily put a halt on it because there's so many people applying to come in under that program. But it also leads me here to an article in here about the Feds lost their bid to place in a job ruling on hold, the thing that the ladies wear to cover their head and their face as they come in. As I say, no political correctness in this class, but as things we should talk about. Certainly, for some, that's uncomfortable. Certainly, the court system says no, you can't take it off in the courtroom. Certainly, turbans for the Sikhs went through the same sort of challenge, and finally, RCMP officers now wear their turbans. It's something we have to look at, but not so much as instant case, but more about the cross-cultural sensitivity we need to develop, and the challenges and the change that takes place and the discomfort that takes place when we open our doors and Canada becomes sort of a vertical mosaic of different cultures. One being Irish, coming in here with my family. Certainly at one point, when you come to the city of Richmond, over 40% of Richmond was Irish. Today it's hard to find an Irish there because the Chinese in large part have taken over Richmond. If you went to Surrey, you'd find a large part of the Indian population have taken over. And that can be uncomfortable a little bit for folks, but we have to recognize that's the reality of globalization and the world. And we're all part of McLuhan, who talked about the global village. We're all part of that big blue marble, and that's the reality. We're all sisters and brothers, but we have to, as strategists and within your organizations, develop this cross-cultural sensitivity, and at the end of the day, see some positives. The idea of this lady who has connections that we need Rolodexes to operate in India, in China, in Pakistan, in the Middle East, etc. And to have these enclaves, these clusters of folks who are trained, understand the culture, have the contacts, that's a wonderful competitive advantage that businesses have in a city like Vancouver, where there's such a mixture, if you will, of cosmopolitan mixture of citizens of the world. That's a wonderful advantage over, say, a place like Japan that does its best to make it homogeneous, that it's just Japanese only. No others can get immigration status or be part of that society. And so it's something we need to look at and talk a bit about in this class, is the advantages of immigration, of the cross-cultural sensitivity, but yet also the challenges we face when you talk about church and some of our culture and social mores and things are being challenged. We can talk a bit about that. I think that's what I want to say. Short, I'm going to cut that there, but just introduce you to the idea, the concept of the Internet of Things and the dangers that presents. The idea that it's like a looking glass, and if we step through that looking glass, you can't get back. And so I'd like you to listen to this for a few minutes. Let me say this, if I can, that I don't want you to be frustrated, but when I put this course together, there's a lot of work to it and a lot of moving parts. And the new edition you got is the 19th edition, and bless their heart, this publisher seems like every 18 months is putting out a new book. So you'll find often in some of the things I refer to a different page number or chapter number, but don't let it upset you. Just go to the index, you'll find the topic. They haven't cut the materials out, they've just moved it to a different page. It's in there. But the text is a great text. It's a good keeper text. I encourage you to keep it, take it with you, put it on your bookshelf in your office. They've got great aided memoirs and things in there. It doesn't have a lot of critical thinking, but it's a great checklist, so it's a book to hang on to. 50% of the course is my materials. You'll not find it in the text. It's just stuff we'll talk about as we proceed between the two of them. But I just put that caveat out there. Don't get frustrated over the difference in page numbers. There's not much I can do about it. There's no way you could have a course like this, as rich as it is with the median interaction, if it had to be changed every 6 months, because they keep changing the edition of the text. And they have changed it. If you just go back and look, almost every 18 months there's a new book coming out. Now, having said that, this session is about a strategist's perspective, trying to get your mind right before we start strategy on how you're supposed to think. And this idea of the online booking, transforming the travel agency, impacts my mind, along with the idea of it says why banks feel very, very afraid. And here the banker's talking about the threat by I think it's Google and Facebook. Google and Apple are breathing down the banks, trying to start a whole new banking industry of online banking, and things like PayPal and Apple Pay, those sort of things are coming in. And this all speaks to something that we need to be aware of, and that's the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things is this interconnectivity that we have on everything we do. There's over 50 billion sensors are going to be here within 4 years. 50 billion sensors. And we're all going to be linked. And I mean, I can just ramble for a few minutes. We're talking about, I read an article the other day of if you can picture a dish for solar power that's lasered down to the collectors on the Earth, that's 200 miles up over our heads. And I'm not talking a baby dish. I'm talking a dish the size of 5 or 6 football fields snapped together. This is significant size, but it's 24 hours a day shooting electricity at a good price down to Earth. That's going to be transformational on the fossil fuel industry. We need to look at that. We need to look at Google. Google are putting these electric cars together. They're almost out here now. They're just around the corner. They're not like 20 years out. They're getting ready to come to us, and certainly in 10 years, I suspect the Google car is something we're going to be much more familiar with. And we're not going to call it cars. To me, it's a mobile office that you're going to get in, give direction where you want to go, and then everything is there for you. You can do your office work in this little box that'll take you from point A to point B. And if you take the drones, we now control drones electronically. All the American drones, and drones are a big issue. In fact, Amazon delivering things are now getting drones up to 400 feet off the ground coming in. It's not a quantum leap to see these automobiles, these mobile offices, actually elevated and going on channels to move from point A to point B. We talk about 3D printing of organs, which is coming, and they're underway now as we talk, growing ears, and a little harder on on kidneys, but they're doing kidneys and pancreases and things of this nature. The University of Alberta has started this sort of process of looking at this. The idea of a computer chip in your leg, your hand, whatever it happens to be. They're doing this now. People get released from Guantanamo, but they have a chip in their back that wherever these folks go in the world, they're being followed and monitored. We're not far away, and we can have this discussion about privacy and not wanting it, and I'm one of those that speak against it, but the reality is, folks, that we're getting everything. Samsung televisions, the new televisions, whether you like it or not, they have the ability to watch you and record what you're saying and do the analytics on that as to what you liked and what you didn't like. Cars at the present time, we have this Star service that if you want to, something goes wrong in your car, you can immediately just start talking to somebody there, and equally, theoretically, they have the ability to shut down your car at any particular point they want to, and theoretically they can speed it up and put the brakes on. All this is just around the corner, and so are you ready for the Internet of Things, and how is it going to impact your daily life, and are you ready for it in your businesses, and more importantly, from a strategist perspective, how are you going to take advantage of that? Because the reality is, folks, let me even go further if I can for a few seconds on that. It's so important when you think of the Internet of Things. I want you to think for a minute that I'm seeing that we have the capitalist model, but the capitalist model is starting to get a high rate of change because of the Internet of Things. I'm going to suggest to you that because of this collaborative commons that the Internet provides, that the old model of capitalism, that's this, if you can imagine, that this curve that comes down and slightly to the right, but the economies of scale kick in for the number of units you produce over time. The cost keeps coming down, the more efficient, the more learning, the more you produce, the cost comes down up to a point that you kind of bulk out and goes up. So, for example, if you had a hamburger facility, up to a certain point, you can produce hamburgers, and the price per hamburger comes down until like 10 buses roll up the front of your place, and that throws up your production operations management to such thing that the price then chug-lugs back up. But that's the traditional capitalist model, and we all strive to get down that learning curve, that economy of scale curve, efficiency curve as fast as we can. But under this new model, the Internet of Things is making it such that it's almost zero-based, zero marginal-based economy. That this newspaper, it costs the money for this paper to be produced, and it comes down that curve just like you're talking, the traditional model. But if you do this in line, the 7.2 billion people in the world today can read this paper. So it's zero marginal cost because it's a collaborative commons. And this goes on almost to everything, whether it be music, shows, education. I mean, you don't need this school to come into this place and sit in bricks and mortars. I mean, it's nice for the bonding aspect of it. But right now, Wharton has got these massive online courses. They've put almost 8 million people, and they're free. You can take a strategy course at Wharton tomorrow, sign up for it, and you can attend and get the same sort of instruction from a Wharton instructor, and doesn't charge you a penny. And that's all part of this new way we're doing it. I mean, do you have to come into this this sort of environment, and or can you take little, like this course, can you take little parcels here and there and bits and pieces of it and take them at your time and your pleasure? And so this Internet of Things is changing the way we're going to think about things, this collaborative commons, we're sharing things more and more. And so the whole new business models are going to have to be redeveloped, this strategist perspective. We can't rely on the industrial age tools of traditional way of thinking. And I raised the point in here that if you look at the Pike's Fish Market little story, we end up with individuals there that how do you harness the energy of one person? And if you believe one person makes a difference to your bottom line, how do you measure that one person? It's not return on investment. It's not the traditional 5 categories of ratios that are in your little black book. But we've got to develop some new metrics to do all this. And so we'll talk some of this as we go through the course, but I'd like to talk a little bit about the Internet of Things on your daily lives and changes it makes, and a bit more discussion as to how big this is. Oh, good. Well, I hope you enjoyed that Internet of Things. Once again, I encourage you to have a look in the bonus section. You'll find another about a 30-minute clip in there with some wonderful PowerPoints on the topic. But each one of you are going to be challenged by the Internet of Things and how you run your business. And it's something you cannot avoid trying to understand, because you can't craft strategy without a full understanding of the Internet of Things, the impact it's going to have on your business as we go through this. Well, that completes today's little session. I hope you enjoyed it and got some value from it. Remember, just 2 meaningful posts, all it required on the discussion site each week. Put more in if you wish. Be glad to work with you on that. But just give me 2 meaningful little chats. I'm available to you anytime. I gave you my phone number. Call anytime. Say hello. I'm there for you, including the weekends, generally from noontime till 5 on both days. Give me a call if you need help or just want to chat, and I'll be there working with you. So enjoy the course. It's going to be a fun ride for all of us. Bye now.